Mitigating and coping with hazards within your community is an essential aspect of public protection and safety. It involves recognizing possible hazards in the community, educating people on how to handle them, and helping to develop a plan to lessen the impact of these hazards. By mitigating and coping with hazards, people in the community can better get ready for an emergency or danger. It can also help to avoid the risk of injury, death, and property harm. But let me ask you, have you ever experienced different hazards in your community? What did you and your family do during the hazards? What do you think are the reasons why there are hazards? Do you know how you can help lessen these incidents? As for the reliability, I researched different topics and questions about my chosen topic and on how I will effectively make this speech, and the references can be seen in the last part of this video. If so, good day. I am me and Codin A. Lucky, and we'll talk about the possible hazards, practical ways of coping with hazards, the kinds of human activities that trigger the hazards, and ways to help lessen the possible hazards of geological, hydrometeorological, marine, and coastal hazards. But first, what are geological processes? According to the Department of Education, with the development team of the module and the writer, Maria Roda E. Panganiban, geological processes are naturally occurring events that directly or indirectly impact the geology of the Earth. During those events, there are possible hazards that may happen in the event of geological processes, such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and landslides. Specifically, the possible hazards that may happen in earthquakes are building collapse, landslides, fires, tsunamis, power outages, and gas leaks. For volcanic eruptions, lava flows, ash, ground deformation, tsunamis, and volcanic lightning. And for the landslides, they can cause flash floods, structural damage, and loss of life. However, there are also practical ways of coping with geological processes, including checking yourself for injuries, helping injured or trapped persons if you can, being prepared for aftershocks, cleaning up spilled medicines, bleaches, and gasoline immediately, opening cabinet doors cautiously, listening to the radio or television for more information from authorities, and staying out of damaged buildings. Moreover, knowing that information, I believe you also ask yourself, what are the reasons behind it? Of course, as human beings, there are also things that we're doing that trigger the hazards. And those are building roads and structures without adequate grading of slopes, poorly planned alteration of drainage patterns, and disturbing old landslides. But there are also ways in which we can help lessen the occurrence of geological hazards, and those are awareness, education, preparedness, prediction, and warning systems that can reduce the disruptive impacts of a natural disaster on communities and timely drainage. Like geological processes, there are also hydrometeorological processes. What are hydrometeorological processes? Based on the operandum, hydrometeorology is a branch of meteorology and the hydrology that studies the transfer of water and energy between the land surface and the lower atmosphere. There are a lot of possible hazards that may happen in the wake of different hydrometeorological phenomena, such as tropical cyclones, monsoons, floods, tornadoes, or ipo-ipo. Specifically, the possible hazards that may happen in tropical cyclones and monsoons are storm surge, flooding, extreme winds, tornadoes, and lightning. Infectious diseases contain chemical hazards and can cause injuries. And for the tornadoes or ipo-ipo, they can destroy large buildings, uproot trees, and hurl vehicles. Therefore, practical ways of coping with the hydrometeorological hazard are to prepare an emergency supply kit, Make sure you have an adequate supply of non-perishable food and clean water at home. And if you live in a place that is in the path of the cyclone or monsoon, close all doors and windows and check your drainage system at home. The kinds of human activities that speed up or trigger the hydrometeorological hazard are mining, which increases the occurrence of tremors, building dams, which can cause earthquakes because of the huge water mass that applies pressure on the surface beneath, and fracking for oil and natural gas. Ways that can mitigate or help lessen the occurrence of hydrometeorological hazards are to implement effective land use and drainage management, improve flood warning systems, plant trees, and construct dams, levees, and other flood control structures. Also, there are a lot of possible hazards that may happen in the event of different marine and coastal processes. From the point of view of Study Smarter, a coastal process is a way in which sediment is moved around the coastal system. This can be through removing and or breaking down sediment, or erosion and weathering, moving it around or transportation, or adding sediment or deposition. And the possible hazards are waves, tides, sea level changes, coastal movement, and storm surge. But specifically, the possible hazards that may happen with waves and tides are drowning and waves crashing. For sea level changes, it increased intensity of storm surge, flooding, and damage to coastal areas. For coastal movement, it can cause a massive earthquake, and for storm surge, can cause loss of life, destruction of buildings, beach and dune erosion, and road and bridge damage along the coast. Practical ways of coping with marine and coastal hazards include beach dewatering, the construction of buildings at a safe distance from the water, and the ban of mining activities. Human activities that speed up or trigger marine and coastal hazards are drainage of wetlands, withdrawal of groundwater, which eventually flows to the sea, and deforestation, which reduces terrestrial water storage capacity, which may also contribute to the global rise in sea level. In addition, ways that can mitigate or help lessen the occurrence of marine and coastal hazards include seawalls, groins, and breakwaters. To sum up, we discussed the possible hazards, practical ways of coping with hazards, the kinds of human activities that trigger the hazards, and ways to help lessen the possible hazards of geological, hydrometeorological, marine, and coastal hazards. Going back, have you ever experienced different hazards in your community? What did you and your family do during the hazards? What do you think are the reasons why there are hazards? Do you know how you can help lessen these incidents? Upon knowing the information I shared, I believe that those questions were answered. For you, do you think that you learned about different hazards and how to cope with them? At the end of the day, knowing such information allows you to better prepare for any potential threats that may arise. Of course, you can share that information with those around you. By mitigating and coping with hazards within the community, the safety of the people who live there is increased and the risk of serious injury and loss of life is decreased. Like what Petro Nemkova said, we cannot stop natural disasters, but we can arm ourselves with knowledge so many lives wouldn't have to be lost if there was enough disaster preparedness.